Well, I'm back at it. I dropped the fuel tank maybe for the last time. I'm hoping so. If I'm lucky, this will be like the final installation of it. So as a refresh, this is a 87 throttle body tank and sending unit. Because in 87, square bodies were fuel injected with a GM throttle body injection. It was the only year they were injected in like a half-ton model or a three-quarter-ton model. They did carry on the square body style up until like 91 in 1-tons and Suburbans and some like some heavy-duty trucks. But 87's your sure bet if you want to get this EFI tank and the sending unit. So because throttle body works on low pressure, the pump only operates on like a maximum pressure of 15 psi and it's regulated to 12 at the motor. They're just crimp-on lines here. I'm going to try and not reinvent the wheel. I'm just going to try and crimp the lines on. We'll see how this works. I mean, it'll probably hold. If not, I'll die in a terrible fireball when this hoses fuel on the exhaust. But for now, I'm just going to clamp it on and roll with it. So this is your feed. This is your vapor, like from the charcoal canister back. And this is your return. So my plan is that I'm going to run a new hose up with the high pressure up to the engine. This I'll just use the factory vent, because why not? Run it through the charcoal canister, it'll be good. And then I'm going to try and run the original feed, the 3/8 line that fed the carburetor up. I'm going to try and slam a 5/16 hose onto the line on the truck and use it as a return. We'll see how this goes. But the fun thing about these tanks is that you kind of just have to like lay the hoses over the frame and then put them on while the tank is kind of like half installed, and then lift the tank up. There's not a lot of room to really get these on and off. It's kind of a poor design, even in carbureted form. But I guess GM wasn't really worried about that, or they probably just wanted you to remove the bed, in which case it's easy peasy. But if you're just dropping the tank out, it's kind of a pain to get these hoses on and off. So they'll probably be a little longer than they have to be. So here's what you're looking at under the truck. Here is the vapor line. For some reason they ran this over the frame as a hard line and none of the others. I don't know why. Here's your fuel level gauge wire. So that has a weather pack connector on it. So I'm going to put a weather pack connector on this, but it's going to get installed on the other side of the frame. That's why they have that harness so long, is because it's like slung over the frame rail or through one of these holes. Now, on this truck, they ran the feed through this hole. So it's kind of strange. The feed goes through the frame, the evap goes over. Because I'm running more lines, I'm probably just going to run all the hoses over the frame. I think it'll be a little bit easier to work on. And then back here, if we get some light, that is the factory evap line hose. I'll leave that alone because who cares. And then behind it, there we go. That was the original feed, so that's now going to be the return. So I guess now we'll put the plan in action and attempt to ruin some new fuel hose. Okay, I ran the line to the fuel filter. It's the Earl's Vapor Guard goodness. I actually decided just to run the lines through the holes where they were, because there's two of them, so I figured why not. Because I had to run the wiring harness over anyway, and one of the holes was for the original wiring harness for the fuel level sensor. So I'll show you the situation on this side. See why I didn't want to do anything underneath this, because it sucks terribly. Okay, so here is the high pressure feed. Here's the return. Here's the vapor. They're all cut reasonably long. Now I have to dangle the tank up to the point where I can't connect the hoses anymore, and then connect them, and then raise the tank the rest of the way up and bolt it in, because that's just how you do it. Okay, I put the fuel pump in with only inches to spare where I can just barely dislocate my arm and get it up inside there to tighten them. And all the lines are on, and I kicked the wiring harness over. I actually did have to run the hoses over the frame because I noticed that because this is the EFI sending unit, that's how they ran it on the EFI truck. And the lines just would have kinked if I would have ran them over to the rubber like grommets there that the original 73 fuel line and wiring harness went through. So whatever, they got kicked over the frame. I put some of that corrugated spaghetti stuff on them to keep them from rubbing. So now I can wrestle the fuel tank the rest of the way in, hopefully never to be looked at ever again. Okay, tank's all bolted in. I put my fancy weather pack connector on here. The red wire is the power wire, it's going to go up to the harness. Then the green one is the sending unit for the fuel gauge. So yeah, nice, can't see shit down here, but nice factory connection there for once. And then here's the lines going over the frame, looking like garbage. And then I went to hook the, oh, my light burned out. Then I went to go hook the filler neck up, and I made the hoses too short. So I'm going to have to order new filler neck hoses to lengthen them like 1 inch, because right now it won't reach out. I'll show you what I mean here. Yeah, it's like 1 inch back. I thought maybe I'd be able to pull it with the screws to hold this up, but it's like nowhere close. I can't even get it into the hole to actually draw it towards it, so I need to get longer hoses. Kind of sucks, but I guess that's what I get for trying to measure it up without having it bolted in the truck. When I just had it on my chest, like making the hoses, I guess it was farther away, and when I actually tightened up those fuel tank straps, it really pulled the tank in more than I was expecting. So, whatever, I can put fuel in it if I have to, but I'll probably get the hoses before I even get to that step. So here's how to assemble this Vapor Guard fuel line. It's pretty simple, especially compared to like fighting with regular AN style line. So, they have these fittings which are unique to the line, like Earl sells them specifically for this Vapor Guard fuel line. It's basically just a hose barb, but this actually slides in there pretty easily. You don't really have to fight with it. And then there's 2 different style clamps. I'm using these like permanent style crimp clamps that actually get smashed down to clamp the hose down. You can also use these EFI style like regular threaded clamps. You'll see they're different than a regular hose clamp because they don't pinch the hose, like they'll slide over it. So this is what you use on any kind of fuel injection rubber line you clamp. But I decided to go with those the crimped ones. So the fitting actually just slides in here pretty easily. Oops, don't want to forget the clamp. You can just push it in like with your thumb. That's it, it's all the way in. And then you can just smash that on there. Earl sells these pliers. These are used for other things too, so I'm not really sure the term of them. But they just go on to the clamp here. Then you just make sure you're past the barb and the clamp, of course. And then you just pinch this clamp down. And then there you go. Done deal. Now I'm going to run this down to the fuel filter, and then I'm going to run it back up to the engine bay and then cut it to length where I'm going to mount the fuel filter. Okay, I got the fuel all plumbed up. Here is the feed line from back that you saw go on the fuel filter. And then here's the return, like I said, going back down into the factory metal feed line. And here is the feed to the engine, which goes back right to that fitting right there to the quick disconnect converter. I left this long because I don't know what's happening with like that whole area of the firewall because I'm doing the air conditioning conversion. So I'm assuming I'll just be able to, tie this up on the firewall, but I didn't want to cut it too short and lose all that line. So this should be safe. I'm not going to let it dangle on the motor like it is now. It will be tied up. And then here I am going to run some like heat sleeving, both for the heat and as like an abrasion, so it doesn't rub on the frame rail here. And I had it, like here's what I'm going to use, but this stuff's huge. It's like 1.5 inches. I ordered 3/4 inch, 1 inch, 1.25 inches, and 1.5 inches. You can see how big this stuff is. I just opened the box and all I got was the 1.25 inches and the 1.5 inches. And I guess I'm screwed because I ordered this stuff like 2 months ago on Amazon, never checked the package, so lesson learned, I guess. You gotta check the stuff when it shows up because they never sent it. So I reordered the 1 inch and 3/4 inch. This will probably just be the 3/4 over that. And I might run some here too. We'll see how much I have. But I'm mostly concerned about getting it down there on the fuel line where it's going to run next to the header. Being that it's rubber, if it was metal, I wouldn't really be concerned about it. But I'll have to slip some of that on there too, so it's all safe for the headers to get toasty. Since it looks like I'm kind of screwed on the fuel system for today, I guess I'll start putting the wiring harness in it. I got a PSI harness. This is the same brand that we used in the Winnebago. There's options on the harnesses. This one is drive-by-wire. It's for a 4L80. It's for the appropriate fuel injectors I have, the appropriate year motor. So they should pretty much go together. I got their brake light switch, whenever on cruise control, so this will disable the cruise, and it's for the lockout on the transmission. But there is this contraption. So the directions kind of give you a rough idea of like how to lay it out. I'm going to try and map it out over the motor here and see what I'm working with, because there is some stuff you have to wire up. Like, it's pretty much done, but you have to have like ignition, power, constant power, grounds, outputs to fuel pumps and stuff like that they can't really pre-wire for you because they don't know what you're doing. So let's see how this contraption fits on the motor. Well, I laid the harness out on the floor here as per the directions, because they want you to get an idea of where stuff goes. So they have like a 2-inch grommet here for your firewall. So all of this is the interior, and then all that is the engine bay. So we have the two connectors here for the factory computer. This one is green and blue, which I learned is for drive-by-wire ECMs. They give you a check engine light connector, a ground. They give you a little fuse box with no fuses in it. I'll get to that later, I guess. A bundle of stuff here. I'm assuming this is for wiring gauges. This harness says cruise control. This goes to the TAC module, which is an additional little computer for the drive-by-wire. So yeah, that's interesting. Then here's all your engine bay connections. Haven't really mapped it out yet, but there should be one that goes basically down the transmission. There's that. Then there's going to be oxygen sensor ones for all the sensors. There's some power wires. I'm sure there's grounds and stuff. This harness does away with the downstream oxygen sensors, the EGR, the evap system, because it's designed for swap applications. So of course this will kind of like nullify any emission controls you'd be looking to keep. Not that it really bothers me anyway in this situation. Plus, according to my local and state laws, a 73 Chevy truck is completely non-emissioned. 75 and older in Pennsylvania doesn't need an emissions test, so I can go wild with this. So I guess I gotta blast a hole in my firewall and start laying this thing out. Well, I got the wiring crammed through. That was a long time of cursing. They say drill a 2-inch hole, but it's really hard to fit the connectors and the wiring through at the same time. Like, I'm really surprised I didn't break a connector, somehow cut the wiring, because I'm still not sure if I did or didn't. Other than that, it's all wired up. I ran to the junkyard yesterday and got another intake manifold. It doesn't have the broken piece on it. Because of my luck, it would have leaked even if I sealed it. So I just went and grabbed another one off another truck. So that's the new intake with its fancy cover, because that was there too. The rest of the wiring here. All the injectors are wired up, the alternator. The only other thing with the harness, other than the fact it doesn't fit to the firewall for her crap, is they put the mass airflow sensor connector on the wrong side. This is actually over to the driver's side. And on all the trucks I've seen, the air intake's over here. So the mass airflow sensor is like over here. I think what they intend for you to do is probably to slam the MAF like right onto the throttle body. But I'm just going to run it out to the factory location so I can use a factory like intake from a truck. So I don't know why they wouldn't just put it there and you could shorten it, but whatever. I'm going to have to lengthen the harness a bit. But I'll wait for that because I'm waiting on an intake coupler to try and mock that up. Being that Amazon screwed me on those heat sleevings, I really can't do too much more over here because I need to wire up the starter, like all the wires going down to there, because this harness comes with like 2 wires. Those 2 red ones right there, those are like the power source off the starter. Same my battery cable and all that, it all needs heat sleeving because of the headers. I did run the grounds. This is the same ground cable I had on the 350, and then they want you to run a 4-gauge ground to the frame and then back to the engine. I gotta get another cable back of the engine to the firewall. I gotta get another cable get for that. I had this one just laying on the shelf for some reason. So seeing how I'm waiting on that sleeving, they do a lot of stuff here, and I'm waiting on those filler neck hoses to redo the filler neck. I guess I'm going to go into the interior. So a couple of changes have to happen in here. First off, I didn't realize this until just recently, because the truck was a 4-shift manual. Well, I guess originally it was a manual, but it was a 3-speed, and it was on the column. I assumed this was an auto column, then I looked underneath the hood and there's actually 2 levers on the side of the column. I'll show you what I mean. This is how your column shift linkage looks. Now this one, if you look in here, it has 2 levers. That's because this was a 3 on the tree, or a manual 3-speed where the shifter was on the column. I didn't notice that until, halfway in this project, or at least when I started taking it apart. And I need an actual automatic column, which just about the time that I started working on this, these automatic columns became made of gold and I couldn't find one. So Corey and I were at the junkyard a few weeks ago, and right as we were about to leave and go up hope of finding one of these, he looked over and there was a yellow Squarebody snowplow truck with not much left of the truck itself, but there was a column in it. So we took it out. Now we had to cut the steering shaft because the lower portion of it was basically a ball of rust. You couldn't even see like where the bolt went into or anything. So the new issue is that apparently 73 through 77 are one column, and then 78 through 80 or 81 is another column. And the difference is the distance from, this is the plate that goes in the firewall, out to the steering shaft is different. So I don't know what year truck that was because there wasn't much left of it, but I was kind of eyeballing it and this looks longer than the one on the truck. So I guess we're going to see. But I needed the column anyway because it's an automatic and has the actual shifter on it. And then, well, I'll just have to make it fit pretty much. I might have to get a different shaft, or another popular thing people do is they put a Jeep Cherokee intermediate shaft in and get rid of the rag joint. Other thing I have to change is that it has the manual pedal setup. I already have the automatic pedal setup I robbed out of the junkyard as well. And then I am using drive-by-wire. So I have a drive-by-wire gas pedal assembly here that I have to make fit. And then I have a, I think 91 through 93 Suburban gauge cluster, which has an electronic speedometer. So it is possible to wire this in and have it work with the LS computer, in theory. That's my understanding, at least. We'll see if that proves to be true or not. I got all that stuff out of the way. Now there's all kind of room for activities. Gauge cluster's out, pedals are out, steering column's out, old gas pedals out. So while I have room, I think the first thing I'm going to do is try and make this drive-by-wire pedal work. So here's the old pedal. It's a pretty good design. It's pretty simple. Just these 3 bolts go to the firewall, and it's also the hinge. Then your cable goes up there. I've actually rigged these in the other cars as gas pedals. They're like pretty universal. Here is the drive-by-wire one, and see if I can get this on camera here. So if I put it in the same spot, the pedal's going to be way over to the right, or the passenger side. I can put it up in here and show you. Yeah, so there's where it goes, and look, it's like over the trans tunnel. So it's going to require some modification. I think I'm going to cut out this curved section of the pedal and make it just straight, because if I center these bolts You see the pedal's kind of centered over that middle bolt. So it'll be the same way on this one. Then I should just have to like blast another hole in it or something to make it fit. But that should be pretty close. So it doesn't really curve this way. So if I maintain this straight part here, but just get rid of that like S curve, then I should be good to go. Guess I'll try and do that first while I have all the room in the world to make it work. The camera battery died, but here's what you missed. I modified the pedal so it's now a straight shot, and I kind of just kept tacking it and installing it and kind of playing with it until I got an angle that's comfortable. And then I made a plate. This bolts to the firewall where the original pedal was, and it moves the pedal over on its own. It's way overbuilt. I think it's 1/4 inch plate. I welded a piece on there. I put the little bend in it for strength. It weighs quite a bit. I'll show you what it looks like in the truck. Okay, here's the finished product installed. You can see there's a pretty good spacing there for the pedals. As you can tell, I started installing the automatic pedal assembly. I wanted to put that in there to make sure the spacing was good. It's a little over to the left from where the factory one was, but it's kind of deceiving because the old one was in line with those 3 bolts, and this pedal's kind of like it's off. It was kind of hard to eyeball. There's the whole bracket. Like I said, there's the bolts where the original pedal mounted. There's my fancy plate. It's got to plug the cable into the tack module. It should be good to go. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. Well, I'm working on the switcheroo of the steering columns right now. It looks like they are the same length, or they appear to be. So I guess, I don't know, we'll see how that works out. I got the steering shaft off the one. I'm waiting for paint to dry right now, so I'll keep working on something else. I got this universal Amazon Chinese as can be cold air intake, and it's kind of the right idea. I mean, I got it for a Silverado, like a early 2000s Silverado. So in the Amazon ad, it said everything's right except for this adapter, which they're right because I had to buy that adapter. The one in the kit is just a straight 4-inch, and the mass airflow is 3 5/8. I rammed a 3.5 on there. There's a 3.5 to 4-inch adapter, but it came with a nice little mass airflow adapter that actually fits into the GM MAF nice. It actually uses the GM like goofy boot where this slides into it and that slides into it at the same time. It was not too bad. Here is the box. You can see I wasn't joking about it being Chinese. It's just like fits Chevy trucks. There's not much direction, but I mean, how much do you need for this? I'm not gonna be able to use these like heat shields and stuff that's engineered for a Silverado, but at least I got like the piping, and it was pretty cheap. It was like 40 something bucks. I had to pay another 15 bucks for this adapter. I'll include the link in the description if you're interested in it. I mean, it's a cold air intake, so I mean, it doesn't have to do that much as far as quality goes. As long as this pipe doesn't magically suck shut and get sucked into the motor, I guess it's fine. But what I'm going to do is, there is a bracket underneath here. Not this one, but there's one back here, a little notch in it. And that probably used to go to the fender, or it's supposed to go to the fender on the Silverado. And without that, I mean, I don't have a clamp, but this whole thing's kind of floppy. Even with a clamp, it'll probably end up wiggling itself off. So I'm going to make a bracket that supports this down to probably the frame rail to kind of hold this up a little bit. So I mean, yeah, this is where the real horsepower comes in now. We're getting into chrome cold air intakes. I got my support bracket all mounted and painted. Mounted there at the frame, that shouldn't move. The intake came with that little rubber like isolator, so I used that. And then it went to the factory bracket on the intake. It's pretty firm now. I mean, it has a little bit of give to it, but it's all rubber mounted. I extended the mass airflow wiring, so that reaches now. I think I extended it like 20 inches and then ran it under the throttle body. I'll tie it up a little better later, but that should keep it out of harm's way. So if I'm lucky, that might be about the last bit of welding I have to do on this project, but probably not. I think that's about enough for this video. I started wiring up the outside of the engine here, and basically like I'm using all the factory wires, this mess here. Big bundle went down to the starter from the factory, and I just cut about like 3 feet out of it, and there's still this much left over. So I'm going to shorten these wires quite a bit. I don't know where the hell they had these running to, but I only need these many wires here. Might not even need that many. But I started the heat wrap stuff. Right now I'm just kind of waiting on putting the steering column back into the truck. I got to get a lock cylinder for that and attempt to change it. But yeah, some progress has been made. It's down to like the nitty gritty kind of boring stuff now. But hopefully in the next video or two, this thing will start. See you then.